Call the dogs in because you're listening to the Field Master Podcast. All right, everyone. Welcome back to episode number 9 of the Field Master Podcast, brought to you by Sportsman's Pride Professional Dog Food. With me this week, we got a special guest. We have 2 special guests this week. We've got one of our members of our team, Justin.
How you doing?
Never been on the podcast before.
Not one.
And I kind of forced him this week.
Not too bad.
I said, you know the guest,
I do.
so you've got to be on.
Right.
And what'd you say to me?
Okay.
That was about it. But
that was about it.
We're really excited to have Justin this week, and we're also excited to have Maddie Haley, veterinarian and owner of Haley Veterinary Practice in Lebanon, Tennessee. Hey, Maddie, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. So, like we kind of preluded to, Justin knows Maddie, grew up together, and you guys grew up, you're childhood friends, right?
We are. Yep. His older brother and me are the same age, and then my brother and Maddie are the same age. So
that's awesome. That's really cool. So, I mean, one of the kind of to start it off, Maddie, the question that I wanted to ask is, you know, growing up, did you know that you always wanted to be a veterinarian?
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much, I'd say as far back. I don't know how much of that Justin remembers, but I'd say as early as 5 years old. That's been my plan.
Yeah.
And I kind of just stuck with it. Of course, there was along the way doubts, but you know, from that early of an age, that was my ultimate end goal. So.
Yeah. So when I was in elementary school, I remember, you know, they ask you in like your little 5th grade yearbook or whatever, they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one of my buddies put elevator repairman.
I knew a dude that said garbage man.
Garbage man? Yeah. Did he end up being a garbage man?
I have no clue.
Because I put professional BMXer, and I don't do that today. So
Did you even ride the bike professionally?
I started to.
Like a mongoose?
No.
Oh, mongoose.
No, it wasn't a mongoose. No, it was a haro, I think is what it was. So this is completely off topic, but I actually was on the way to be on the junior Olympic team, and I tore my meniscus. So I didn't get the opportunity in that I started swimming after that. It was a lot better for me.
There you go.
But I say that because I wanted to know, was there like a specific moment? I mean, you said you knew at like 5 years old. So was there a specific moment, if you can remember, where you were like, this is why I want to be a veterinarian?
I don't know if I know a specific moment. I really don't. I know that, like I said before, from that early of an age, but I think it was more just like a drive, a passion, animals. You know, they were just,
right.
Of course, we grew up playing sports, which is how Justin and I and the family and all knew each other, but I was always somewhat distracted by, you know, animals in general, you know.
Yeah.
And, of course, starting out, it was your typical domestic pets, dogs and cats, and then it just kind of developed from there.
Right.
But never really scared to go like everybody else that we knew about snakes and stuff. This dude would just
I was always into
walk right up to one.
catching the snakes and lizards. And
Well, I told Justin when you were coming on, I was like, can he bring like a monkey or something? Because you work in exotics,
Right.
which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
But I said he can bring any animal he wants as long as it's not a snake.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't know why. I'm good with animals. I mean, I don't have an issue with any animals besides snakes. I'm like, I can't.
Snakes and spiders.
See, even spiders, I'm okay.
The little ones, I'm fine.
Yeah.
they move quicker, though. The big ones you can see.
Yeah, that's true. The big ones, I think that's the problem. I can see them.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's exactly
they're
right.
giant. They're giant. So, okay. So after high school, you attended Middle Tennessee State University for your undergrad, right? And then after that, so you obviously have a biology undergrad.
So animal science major.
Got it.
Yeah, with a minor in biology.
Got it. Okay. And then, so after MTSU, you went to the Deep South. You went, I mean, almost as far south as you can go for universities, and you went to Tuskegee.
Right.
So did you go, because I know you worked at Tuskegee as well. You went to work, or did you go for the degree?
Ultimately, well, no. So I guess I'll back up a little bit. But so MTSU, yes, I was there. I finished my undergrad. While there, I worked at a small animal practice, which was dog and cat only for the most part. And then once I finished my degree with the goal of going to vet school, I had an opportunity, saw a job opening where I could work in the anatomy lab at the vet school down at Tuskegee University. So that's what got my foot in the door. Did that for a couple years, and then ongoing, I did it all through vet school as well. Ultimately, my title was gross anatomy lab coordinator. And it was definitely a gross job. That was back when, what was the TV show, the Dirty Jobs?
Oh, Dirty Jobs,
Micro,
yeah.
I guess it was.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, you got to get him here, got to get him here. And I think I went as far as probably trying to get him there, and it just never happened. But so that was my foot in the door, like I said, and it was almost like I had a couple extra years of school. So that was between undergrad leading into vet school, and then I just kind of ran with it from there.
So, I mean, you kind of touch on it, but a gross anatomy lab coordinator. So, I mean, I have my undergrad in fisheries and aquaculture, and we would work a lot in labs, preserving samples and things like that. So is that kind of what the anatomy lab is, just preserving?
So ultimately, yes.
It's,
It's. I mean, the goal is to get as much exposure as a vet student as you can. So somebody's got to prepare those specimens. So embalming and preparing for just the study aspect of it, leading into the exams, and then everything in between. So.
Got it.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. It sounds like it's like you have a conversation, when you're back home. It's like, oh, what'd you do today? Well, you probably don't want to know.
Right. Yeah, because it goes from the processing of the specimen, analyzing to disposal. So all the things in between and the decomposition, and so yeah, very in depth.
Yeah, it sounds delightful.
Yeah.
Okay, so after you got so you worked both, and I think that's really interesting because so you went to Tuskegee. Obviously, you wanted to get your DVM, but you started working there. Was the thought always, well, I'll work there and then I'll also get my degree at the same time, or did you start working there and I want to get my degree?
Kind of the same, but I mean, the ultimate goal was, hey, that's my foot in the door. You know what I mean? So get there, get the exposure, see if it, even though it's been a lifelong goal, dream, whatever, but when you're there doing it, working with the professors, the vet students, you're like, all right, this is what I'm signing up for, But it was that much more motivation,
right?
So,
And it's nice because I mean, you going through vet school as well as doing this at the same time, you get almost a lot more exposure than the average vet student would.
Absolutely.
I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, do you feel like after you graduated and you did something else, which was really, really cool, but do you feel like you kind of had like the upper leg that more than most vet students because you had all this exposure?
I would say some, yes, and I did because I tell people this all the time. Like, I've never been maybe when I was younger, but like your straight A student. You know what I mean? So it's like school. Yeah, I got through it, and there again, I had a goal to achieve, but I relied more on, yes, I had to make the grades, but building my resume, my hands on the practical side of things.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, yes, especially even just starting my first year of vet school, and anatomy is always the hardest, as a general rule, the hardest course for most vet students.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had dissected multiple animals and done all these things, and I worked for the director of admissions who was head of the anatomy lab. So I'm not going to say I loved it because it was, it was torture. There was times where I was like, do I really want to do this,
Yeah.
But looking back on it, it was worth every second. And I never really thought I would say that day to day because it was, it was a lot of, like I said, dirty work, but just hard work. And, but it made my first year on the anatomy side. I struggled in other, courses, but the anatomy side was kind of a breeze for me. So I was very thankful for that. And then it kind of led on to like certain exposure and stuff that the university gave me that 100% me, my classmates, I do feel like we had a leg up because we had a lot of hands-on things.
Yeah, let's talk about one of the other things that you did while you were at Tuskegee is you also shadowed at Montgomery Zoo in Alabama, where during your time there, you primarily worked in exotics.
Right.
So was this your gateway into exotics, or did you know going into school you wanted to focus on exotics?
I think at the back of my mind, I pretty much when I knew I was getting in, yes, I wanted to focus on exotics. Just colleagues I've talked to, most universities are not going to have like they may have an exotic elective or, maybe work with a close zoo or something, but Tuskegee just wasn't one of those. Yes, they had an elective, but it just, to me, was not enough if you really wanted to pursue it. So, yes, dogs and cats, I planned on doing that, but I entertained, hey, I want to do zoo medicine. So the more I looked into that, they do a lot of weeding out because one, you figure there's only a handful of zoos in the world or the country or whatever, so there's only so many spots. But you were required to do like a small animal internship and some things like that. So, I entertained it and I was like, well, let me just look into this. So I just ultimately kind of talked to some people in the area and got in touch with his name was Dr. Kotwitz, but he was the attending vet at the Montgomery, Alabama Zoo. And I was doing that before I was in vet school. So ultimately, I'd say I did it 5 years, give or take. And it was just kind of like, hey, man, come down here when you can. And every chance I got. I mean, I was working at some other small animal clinics, dog and cat and stuff in Montgomery just on my time off. And goes back to I was just trying to get as much exposure as I could. But any chance I could, I was at the zoo.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I have friends in town who are also vets, and I knew him while we were at school as well. And man, they would just run rampant, doing anything they could while they were in vet school, because that's really like the name of the game. It's really cool that you have like your DVM and you get all this exposure. But man, they don't talk about how tired vets are when they're going through school, because they are nonstop. I mean, working anywhere they can just to get the exposure. So it's really cool though that you got an opportunity at the zoo to do that.
So when you said that like in school they offered some courses in exotics, what was the exotic? Like, is it like mainly like birds, or is it like what is considered their exotics?
Anything really
That's
small
not a dog
mammals.
or a
Yeah,
cat.
anything outside of dogs and cats for the most part. So yes, birds, reptiles, small mammals, rodents, rabbits, things like that.
Okay.
And to an extent, there's some aquatic veterinary medicine and stuff, few and far between as far as people that do it. But you figure even aquariums and stuff, they're going to have a vet that just tends to the marine life, So that's considered an exotic, So
Yeah. Okay. So at the zoo, did you have a specific exhibit that you would work under while you were there, or because you went and shadowed when you can, was it kind of like, hey, what's the flavor of the day?
Pretty much that. It was, for the most part, you're just there in case something happens, and of course things are going to happen, or there could be some routine just procedures, sick animal surgeries, things like that. So no, not one specific. Now, I did probably spend more time in certain exhibits just because, like I worked a lot with the giraffes, and you figure they have a really long gestation. So that was we were constantly overseeing that.
Yeah.
From what I remember, there was a giraffe with a pretty significant limb injury. So, that took, I kind of helped round up a few vets from the university, and we'd go, back and forth. So that was a very neat, experience for sure. But to answer your question, no, it's just kind of, hey, where are we needed today? And, I'd hop on the golf cart with him and just, hey, where are we going?
Right.
Yeah.
So I have to ask this question, and this is the child in me coming out. Did you ever watch two giraffes fight?
Yeah, the videos. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's man, it is.
For
It is.
anyone who hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, they just swing their necks at each other.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to watch. It's brutal. I mean, it is. Yeah.
It is. And then you realize, like, if you ever go to the zoo and you look at a giraffe or something, and we went to
They look so gentle.
They look so
I would
gentle,
kill you.
and then they're like, I could knock you in a football field away with my neck. But we went to the Cincinnati Zoo. We were visiting a friend in Cincinnati, and when we went, they have a platform where you can feed the giraffes and everything like that. And the platform is probably 2 stories tall. And that giraffe is still looking down on you. And you're like, holy cow, these giraffes are massive. And then I saw a giraffe fighting another giraffe, and I was like, anyways.
I'm done.
It's like, it's completely off topic, but it's just funny.
Is the Cincinnati, is that Jack Hanna Zoo or is that Columbus? I can't remember.
That's Columbus.
Because
I think
you
it's
and we
Columbus.
went to it when we were kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's
Cincinnati
Columbus.
Zoo is really cool. It's one of a lot of zoos are, but it's like dead middle of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy when you get in, you're like, how is this a zoo? Because like the hospital's right next door and everything. It's like, if you live in an apartment right next to it and you hear like a lion roaring at night, that would terrify me.
Right.
I don't know. Might make you feel a little safer.
Yeah, unless you get a warning that
unless
that lion's out.
Yeah.
All right. So so you said you specifically work with giraffes. One of the questions that I had for you was, you get all this exposure to exotics, and then you end up going to work for a mixed animal practice after school, after Tuskegee and everything like that. did you did you try to find an exotic vet clinic out of school, or was it kind of like, I want to take the first thing I can get?
Well, and there was a lot of planning as far as, how you get all your requirements and preceptorships, I guess is what they call them. Get all that stuff out of the way, and then, all right, now it's time to find a job. So I did a lot of calling around and then, set up some interviews, things like that. I was honed in more on a mixed animal practice, meaning, which is what we're referencing, but not necessarily. Most of those mixed animal practices are going to be dog, cat, and then farm animals. So most of them are not going to be exotics. They may see a rabbit or a guinea pig or something here and there. So, yes, I entertained some exotic clinics, but there again, there's so few and far between. So you knew it could kind of be a niche.
That was my question, was how many exotic?
There's just, I don't...
Like anybody who in the state of Tennessee, there's probably not very many.
Not very many. And, there's a few around Nashville. More of those clinics are maybe bird and reptile only, or bird specific, or there's some bird and cat clinics and stuff, but just very few.
Kind of odd.
I know. Yeah. Well, there was one here close by. I can't, there was a Tuskegee grad too that I think she was up around Florence or something.
But. Okay.
So when it comes to, because I guess we'll lead right into it. So you left the mixed animal practice and you decided you wanted to start your own clinic. Being an exotic clinic, do you find, and is there specific requirements that you have to meet with, whether it's, the vet associations or the state or anything like that, to be able to work on exotics?
No, not necessarily. You have the credentials just right out of school, ultimately. Maybe not the experience, but, the main thing is going back to exposure. But, yes, if you wanted to specialize, which is just like human medicine, you could pick anything to specialize. So I don't really know of any. There's some bird specialists, that maybe Middle Tennessee area or surrounding, but now there's affiliations, like the American Veterinary Medicine Association, and then there's classifications within that, and certain groups that are honed in on birds or reptiles or both, and so there's affiliations that you want to be a part of so that you can be a part of their continuing education and just the exposure, and then just networking ultimately. Right. But it's not a requirement. It's just smarter.
See, it's so interesting to me because, I would think that there would be, especially when we get to, talking about what you do work with, that you would have to have certifications. You would have to, be licensed. Maybe it's just insurance ultimately, but if you're working with giant cats or reptiles or, venomous snakes or something like that, you would have to have that kind of certification in order to work with it.
Ultimately, I guess, in a roundabout way, now that you say it like that, there you have a class, like class 1, class 2 of what you're accredited to work on. So that's something that you do go through, but they kind of incorporated that into school. And of course, it's like taking some extra classes and paying more money. But yeah, under my license, if I just wanted to do a dog and cat clinic, it would be a specific class. But since I'm doing a little bit of everything, I think it falls under a class 2. So to answer your question, yeah. Just from a licensure and a liability standpoint, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, well, before we do talk about what you work on, because there's a long list. It took me a while to type it out. Let's go ahead and take a quick commercial break.
In the upper Midwest, people appreciate the little things, like warm drinks around the fire, breathtaking landscapes, a hearty stack of flapjacks with extra...
Yeah, that's true and all, but we also love to hunt.
When it comes to hunting with dogs, Lauren Harvey's in a class of her own. Whether it's taking a cold trail out from the bait, treeing a black bear, or mountain lion, Lauren's dogs are always at the top of their game. Lauren trusts Sportsman's Pride professional dog food to fuel her pack, helping her dogs recover quickly after a long run, building lean muscle tone, and giving her pack healthy, shiny coats from the Omega Pride skin and coat system in every bag. Experience the Sportsman's Pride difference. Developed by experts, trusted by legends. New Sportsman's Pride Fieldmaster grain-free dog food. Available now.
All right, we're back with Maddie Haley of Haley Veterinary Clinic in Lebanon, Tennessee. So we spent that entire break just talking about all the animals we want. And for those who missed it, we decided that we're going to move with Maddie and we're going to go take care of all the animals that he wants, because
I know my wife would.
I think it's pretty much we would be working at a zoo. That's
yeah.
really is what it would be like.
Yeah.
All right. So we mentioned that you're located in Lebanon, Tennessee. It's right outside in Nashville. It's about what, 40?
About 30 minutes or
About
so.
30, 40 minutes away. So is there a reason why you chose Lebanon and you didn't kind of go closer to the city?
Well, I wanted to be further away from the city ultimately,
Right.
Because even when I lived in Alabama during school, I was fortunate enough to live, on a fairly large farm, and kind of made up my mind. Look, I've lived in the city my whole life. Ultimately, I wanted land, and there again, room for the animals.
Right.
And so once I honed in and found a job, then I was like, all right, I got to find something within a reasonable distance from that clinic. And so I found some property in a little small town, Watertown, Tennessee, which is about 20 minutes outside of Lebanon. But ultimately, I just wanted to be in kind of a more rural area.
Right. And so being in a rural area and focusing on exotics, number one, you should have your own reality TV show. I mean, the show writes itself at that point. But do you have a lot of clients and, that travel from Nashville out to Lebanon to come see you?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, even a lot of surrounding areas goes back to us talking about the shortage, or just, very few people that work on, specific exotics. So we have clients come from all over. I mean, I had a Michigan client that brought a primate in. It was a small monkey. I can't remember if it was a marmoset or a capuchin. And there's very few people that are, understandably so, willing to work on the primate. So I decided to sign up for that. So they come from all over. But so yes, absolutely Nashville, but specifically more so with birds and reptiles and stuff. But yeah, people come from surrounding areas all the time.
So it's funny that you mentioned capuchins, because when I was in high school, I don't know why. First of all, it's Florida, so who knows?
Right.
Half the stuff that goes on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I worked for a lady. I cleaned horse stalls, and I showed horses for a little while. And she had capuchins, and man, they're so much fun.
Like, how do you get them?
I don't know. I have always wondered that.
Unfortunately, it's too easy. There's a lot of people that, most people don't need a
Shouldn't
monkey, to
have
be
one.
honest with you.
Right.
But I have some wonderful primate clients that do it right. But
Right.
a lot of people just don't know what they're getting into. And, the marmosets, they're
Those are the
manageable
little
because
ones,
they're
right?
tiny.
They're the
Yeah.
tiny ones? Okay.
But they typically just like their owner. But anything much bigger than that, they're just... Yeah, they're awesome to watch. They're very entertaining. They're very personable, especially if you give them the enrichment they need. But there's a lot of exotic sales and stuff that probably make it too easy for the wrong person to get them, or they think they can make money off of it, ultimately.
Yeah, so the lady that I worked for in Florida, her name's Dina. She rescued capuchins because she used to, in Key West, they have I think it's an exotic ranch that the prison works on. And I don't know, long story short, she worked with ostriches and, capuchins, things like that. And so she ended up rescuing some capuchins and stuff and kept them in the backyard. And man, they were so much fun. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's terrifying the first time you work with one, because you're like, wow, you are way stronger than I am, because they're strong.
Mm-hmm.
So we also touched at the beginning of the show that you left a mixed animal practice to start your own exotic clinic. Do you what made you kind of take that leap? What was it that you were like, you know what, I want to start out on my own journey. I want to create my own animal clinic, and I want to focus on exotics?
Ultimately, it was my end goal anyways, but the clinic that I was working for, there again, mixed animal, meaning more so farm animal than your dog and cat. But when I came on, they did see some small rodents and mammals and things here and there. But ultimately, I was like, hey, let me work on some exotics here. And we didn't advertise it a lot, but the word finally, got out. So I was doing a lot of it, but we weren't really set up for it. It was just because it was a walk-in clinic only, and those things just take way more time. And so I kind of learned what I could do, what I wanted to do, and just ultimately how to make it make more sense, which that was kind of the plan when I made the transition.
Right. So let's mention what you do work on. And this is going to kind of be your PSA for anyone in the area. So Tennessee area. Dogs, cats, small mammals, primates, reptiles, avians, and barn animals.
Mm-hmm.
No lions, no tigers.
We do have some large cats that come in, but ultimately the largest cats that I see there are the servals, the African servals, and bobcats, and then we see. I think I have a couple caracals that have come in, which are kind of the size of a bobcat.
Yeah.
Any
So
lynxes?
I don't think I've seen any lynx there.
lynx? I don't know. He would know. I wouldn't.
Lynxes? No, I think it
Lynxes?
would just be lynx.
So I joke, I talked about it on the break that I worked at the Pyramid, but we had a guy who owned a bobcat, and he would bring the bobcat into Bass Pro, and it was so funny because it was like every Tuesday or something like that. And we'd be like, oh, it's Bobcat Day. And so we would all kind of like just wait for the Bobcat to come in because it was fun.
Just seems like that the cats that could potentially eat you doesn't need to be a pet.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, it's like, oh,
I mean, they're still
so cute.
Yeah,
from afar.
yeah.
Until you have to work on them. And
Yeah.
the owners come in and like, I can't touch them. I'm like, well, how do you think I'm going to reach in the cage and touch it if they don't even like you? I've run into that a handful of times.
So, one of the things that I see a lot more, especially on, obviously social media, it brings everything to us. We would never see this in, even 100 years ago, but servals. I see a lot of people owning servals, and, it obviously it's geared towards, my feed and everything like that. Are servals, they're a larger cat, but I feel like they don't necessarily, let me preface this by saying, I don't think a lot of big cats should be house pets,
Right.
but are servals becoming more and more common for household
Like
pets?
domesticated.
They
Yeah,
are.
like-
People are domesticating them, and I've got some clients that have some fairly tame ones. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to walk in the clinic and appreciate us. I mean, they just typically don't. But I've been in their homes and seen how they interact with them. But I've also gone in similar clients' homes that they're, whether they're breeding them or, and that takes inspections too. So like, they'll call me in to do a, walkthrough for the state and things like that. But some that are just still very, very wild, and you're not going to go in the enclosure with them.
Yeah, so that kind of was leading to my next question was, let's say I owned a serval. How is it that, people are able to own them when they're such a wild cat? I mean, and you kind of touched on it, I guess. So does a vet has to go out and certify like, hey, this is safe for...
If a client's doing it right, reproducing them, selling them, whatever it may be, and it's even hard for me to keep up with which species require permits because some don't and it doesn't make sense, and then others you would think wouldn't do. So, but yes, most of those facilities require at least an annual walkthrough, and there's paperwork and documentation that I have to fill out. Like in this scenario, what's the plan for an emergency or routine preventative medicine and stuff. So there are things that the state hones in on and wants them to do correctly.
And they have to have a specific license, right, in order to own them. Got it. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, working in an exotic clinic, I mean, I'm used to small vet clinic. It's got four rooms where you can see a dog, cat, and they're divided so they don't have to see each other. But with an exotic clinic, I mean, I feel like you have to have rooms for all different scenarios. And I feel like logistically, there's so much that can change day to day.
Right.
So how do you operate a exotic clinic?
Ultimately, the building that I started the clinic in was an older building, so I had to kind of get creative with it, just the layout and make it flow. But we did from day one do two separate lobbies. So we kind of have our dog lobby, and then we have what we call our cat and exotic lobby. Ultimately, majority of cats are in a cage, and they're going to be more quiet. They're not barking dogs, so we kind of put our exotics over there. But so that's just kind of the waiting area. The exam rooms, they're just interchangeable. We just roll through them. But when it comes to procedures like the barn animals and stuff, so I don't do any horses and cows, but goats, pigs, poultry, things like that. I have a separate little barn behind the clinic, so I just keep all of that. I pretty much tell everybody, like, anything that smells or has mites stays out there in that barn, so
Got it.
keep them out of the clinic. But, so, yeah, there's ways that we separate everything, and I'll do surgeries that, out in the barn on the livestock stuff to, keep it from, contaminating the indoor surgery room.
Yeah, because you said you don't do horses or anything like that, but my parents have cows and a horse and everything like that, and they've had to get surgery before, and so in your barn you don't have like did you say you have a surgery suite in your barn? So I've seen the ones for large
Oh,
horses
it's
and things
massive.
like that. It is huge.
Yeah.
And so I guess what's nice is, with a smaller barn working on smaller animals, I'm sure it keeps your costs way less.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have to run all
And
the
lower risk of injury to staff and the animals too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so being so close to Nashville, you've got the Nashville Zoo right there. Do you get to work with Nashville Zoo at all?
No, I mean, we can collaborate on, well, usually it's us reaching out to them if we have, a question. And it's kind of hard to get in touch with those people because they have so much to do. And, and they have internship opportunities and things like that. So long story short, no, not as much as you would like. And, but they're, for the most part, they're an available resource if I have questions. And doing the primates, we have some. My office manager even got in touch with, I can't remember, somebody in South Africa that we can, bounce questions off of,
cool.
because they're dealing with these primates every single day. So,
Right.
so no, not as much as I'd like, but I am able to do, some of the little private zoos, I guess you would call them. Lucky Lad Farm.
Yeah.
They've hired a zookeeper and slowly adding to their collection. So I've been doing their stuff, which is ultimately raccoons and possums, and I think they might have a fox, or they're getting, but stuff like along those lines. So I'm still able to do zoo type medicine, but it just kind of varies.
So do you work with any of those like the wildlife rescue things?
Yeah, to an extent. They and that's something I did at the previous clinic and now. Because a lot of times people will just find an injured wild animal stuff, and I've done a lot of that over the years and still do, and ultimately we'll stabilize them, treat them accordingly, and then transport them to those type places. Yeah,
okay.
There's usually volunteers that are run them back and forth.
That's cool. So you obviously work with a ton of different animals. You've seen more than we could imagine. But out of all the animals that you get to work with, which one of them has been your favorite, or do you like to? I know
More
you see,
enjoyable.
more enjoyable, or what's your coolest experience?
And I get that
guess?
question a lot, and I always say, like, how do I answer that? Because I think the way my mind works is that's probably what breaks up the monotony, is that I'm able to work with so many different ones. So I don't know that I have the specific. I love doing all the reptiles, and during the break we were talking about, like, not a lot of people have them, but like the caiman, everybody calls them alligator. I guess technically crocodilian, but stuff like that. Just the stuff that most clinics are not able to see, or
More unique animals.
yeah, just more unique animals. Birds, I love working on birds, but it can be really stressful because they're any exotic. It's just they're very fragile at times. The reptiles are much more hardy creatures for sure.
Yeah, because they can live in such harsh environments and things like that. So, out of all the animals that you do get to work with, is there one species or one group of animals that has more of like a personality that sometimes can be harder to treat, or
Probably
harder to
the
work on?
primates, honestly, just because they're so human-like. So it affects you different too when they're that sick, because they are so human-like. You know what I mean? It's like they're processing. The mental capacity is there. It's like they know when to ask for help in a weird way. You know what I mean? So probably personality-wise would be the primates.
Yeah. Is there one kind of set of animals where, I don't know why, I just keep imagining like someone pulls up with a tiger or something in the in the truck bed, but like, is there something where let's say you've got something coming in that you have to treat, where you kind of have to like shut down the rest of the clinic so you can treat one animal? Because I'd imagine if you're working on like reptiles,
Right.
That's to me when you would have to do something like that.
Just depends. I guess most of those reptiles are not that. You can get some big snakes and stuff like that. Anything that's really, really, out of character for a normal day, which we don't really ever have normal days because, we have appointments, but you just never know what's going to happen. So at any given time, you're going to have a variety of species. Just, I'm in one room, in the next, and, circle back, staff's doing this, that, and the other. So, if you had like a larger cat or something you really had to be prepared for, I did have a client come in with probably a 30-pound, give or take, macaque, and just walked in like it was normal, had it in a cage, and just wanted me to drop what I was doing to work on it. And I'm like, that thing could hurt me really easily.
What is a macaque?
Just a large primate, big monkey, and they're really there's several different types of macaques, but they're one of the more.
Is that the ones that they're usually like black? You see them in like diapers, and they kind of just like swing through.
Those are usually, you're probably thinking of like chimpanzees, but people
No,
put
not the chimps.
Yeah,
No, I know what those look like.
Yeah.
These are like, they're like real fuzzy looking?
There's so many different ones, but maybe I don't know. People put diapers on all of them. It's like, you know what I mean?
Right.
They do, but I don't know. Maybe there's a variety of them, and they're just a powerful primate, and so stuff like that you really have to prepare for. I did have a serval. I mentioned it earlier that was one of the larger that I've seen, and there again the owner couldn't touch it. But wanted me just to didn't even really want me to sedate it, was very reluctant for me to sedate it, and I'm like, I can't do anything to this animal. It's physically trying to kill me. And she came in on a Saturday, a half day with no appointment, and just kind of walked in. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this?
You're like, all right, let me put on my full body armor.
Hey,
and
long story
chainmail.
short, I ended up working on that. We got it asleep. I did everything I needed to do, and then the owner declined everything. So I put everybody at risk, drew blood, did all this stuff, and no, we'll just see how it does. Okay.
Well, then how about you see what it does back home?
Exactly.
So, so is there anything that the general public would be surprised to know, because we don't get to work in exotics every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
The majority of people we know have dogs and cats.
yeah, the majority.
Maybe a snake here and there.
Yeah, I think the most. I only have one story where my buddy bought a snake and he couldn't find it for like 3 hours, and he just had a baby. And so, I mean, that's like the closest thing I got to working with exotics. I mean, besides what I used to do. But is there something that like the general population would be surprised to know when it comes with working with exotics?
Well, I mean, one, it's almost like no two cases are going to be the same, even if it's the same species, because you don't know how that one's going to react to just human interaction or trying to administer an injection or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of just have to learn as you go or tweak things as you go, and always be prepared for the worst, when you're dealing with those types of animals. Like pigs, potbelly pigs. I work on a lot of them, and everybody thinks you're hurting them every time they're screaming and shrilling. I mean, you can look at them and they're going to do that, So it's like those, and they're big, powerful animals. They're solid, fat too, but muscle, Yeah. So, and a lot of people don't work on those either. So more so in that barn, I was designing it for the pigs. I mean, I work on a lot of stuff in there, but you gotta, work smarter, not harder, or whatever. So it's, kind of funneling them to an area where I can get my hands on them, but you don't want to have to wrestle with them unnecessarily. Right. So I had to kind of design like a chamber that I could, ultimately run them through a chute system so that then I can hook up anesthetic gas and, all those things. And that was kind of just talking to a couple friends and stuff like, we could try this, and it's worked great, So
That's awesome.
Just being prepared for, dogs and cats, of course, are challenging enough, and we do tons of that, but the exotics do. And monkeys, I mean, you got to get your hand on those monkeys, and the owners will just hand them to you, and I'm like, they're going to bite me. You know what I mean? So, you've always got to be prepared, whether it be towels and gloves, and it's like anything. You do it enough, you learn how to, it's just a matter of moving quick and restraining them. Of course, they're going to act like you're hurting them too, but there's safe ways to do it.
So out of all the animals that you see, would you say that it's kind of like 50-50 split between, common animals, dogs, cats, and 50% split for like exotics?
And it's been several months since we pulled those numbers, but at one point it was almost like a 60-40 more so being exotics.
Wow.
Yeah. So those numbers have probably changed simply because we're growing, and I've only had it open a couple of years, so we're getting more and more clients. So it's kind of evening out, but I don't know those exact numbers, but it was like that as of like 6 months ago.
Wow. That's really cool.
And you've been in that location, what, 3 years?
A little over 2 years.
A little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
2 years. So any plans for expansion or anything like that?
I've got some things in mind, but won't happen anytime soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. So you're opening up your own zoo is what we've heard, and we're gonna come work for you.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, Maddie,
you heard it first.
You heard it first. I mean, we're leaving. We're going to work on the zoo. It's like what's that movie with Matt Damon? We bought a zoo. Yeah, that's it.
Hey, I'll tell you one off the wall random story that this happened several years ago, but end of the day, random call, something about an ostrich with a laceration. So I'm like, cool, I hadn't worked on an ostrich before. Here we go.
This is different.
Yeah. And it was about an hour drive to get there, and everybody just thinks it goes back to like credentials and stuff. Just because I work on lots and lots of exotics, there's a few things I'll turn down. I still got to look stuff up, man. I don't have all this in my back pocket, you know. Right. So, we're driving and heading. We have an hour commute, and I'm like, look up this drug. You know, how are we gonna get this thing to sleep? So ultimately, we've been told it had a big laceration. You figure, I think this thing was like 12 foot tall or something. I mean,
they're massive,
really tall, and it was up in its teens. It might have been 20-something years old. And they just had it out there on their farm, and they were like, Doc, I don't understand. We're feeding it, and all the food just keeps falling out of its neck. And I'm like, all right. So they still don't know what happened, So we get there, and sure enough, it's just Chipper running around eating, but it's all just coming right back out. Wow. So it had gotten hung in a fence or some kind of predator. I really don't know what happened ultimately, but and you can't just walk up and sedate the thing. Well, I through the fence did give it an injection while they were feeding it, but it just wasn't enough, and it was a massive, massive animal. Well, it's like we working at the large animal clinic. We had a dart gun with a scope and everything, a tranquilizer gun. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a hunter. I don't, so they're the kind of the farm hand. He's like, Doc, are you a good shot? No, I practiced in the tree before I got here. You know what I mean? And he, he was pretty humble, and he was like, man, I was a sniper in the military, and I just handed him the gun. I'm like, all right,
you're like, you take it.
Yeah, why are you asking me? So sure enough, that's the approach we took, and it was probably a foot-long laceration. We had to sew up the esophagus, then the skin, and everything, and thing went on to do great. I even talked to him a couple years later, from what I remember, and it was still good. So you just literally never know. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'll do it. You know what I mean? So,
holy cow. Yeah. Your house calls are a little bit different. Mine are like, hey, can you do the dishes when you get home? Not like, hey, can you sew up an ostrich neck? So why don't you go ahead and tell us, you've got probably, how many staff members do you have?
Right at 15.
Right at 15. Mm-hmm. Do you have another vet?
I do.
Well?
I have an associate vet. She is fairly fresh out of school. She's been with me 8 or 9 months. Dr. Cruz is her name. And she's got pretty strong fascination with the smaller mammals and birds and things. So those are hard to find, the exotic vets. So that's been a plus for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine that, because we have a vet friend here in town, and they're interviewing for vets right now because their clinic is growing rapidly. With the growth of our town, they have to. And, one of the things that they look for is like, what do you specialize in? So when you were interviewing, do you do like a working interview? Mm-hmm. Do you kind of like, how do you go about that selection?
So the downside, and I don't think anybody ever really saw it coming, but the way it's explained to me, it's not necessarily that there is a shortage of vets because they're out there. The schools are producing them, but they're coming out and taking corporate jobs, or corporates are buying up small private practices, so they're hard to find, or they're not interested. They're scared off by the exotic side of things. Yeah. Scared might not be the word, but just the interest is not there, or they're uncertain. So that was very difficult, and so I didn't really have a lot of interest, right off the bat.
Yeah.
But yes, that she like I said, was right out of school, and exotics were one of her main interests, and she kind of had a 5-year plan. She's from Indiana, so she wanted to get as much exposure as she could. So that's kind of how we lucked into that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned kind of like corporations buying out clinics or things like that. A lot of companies, you don't realize, but there's like vets on staff for some companies. Like Alabama Power, for example, has veterinarians on staff because they also have to do research for streams and everything like that, and they can go and they can treat and things like that if they. So it's really interesting.
Right.
You don't think about that. I would have never thought that either if I didn't have experience with.
There's certain things. Yeah, there's social media, keeps you up with people, up to date with people, and I've seen some colleagues and stuff that maybe have gone to Tuskegee and what are they doing? Kind of reading their bio and stuff, and some of the human facilities, hospitals and stuff that have vets on staff for I don't know how much of it research purposes or whatever it may be, but exactly. There's definitely things just off the wall that you don't realize that vets have opportunity to go do.
Yeah. So being a vet, there's a question that I wanted to ask you. Obviously Sportsman's Pride, we're a dog food, company, and we focus a lot on like nutrition and things like that. What is your take on, I see it way more on social media now. I don't know that I heard of it probably, since honestly, I think like TikTok or something, came out where there's just so much information available to you. But the take on like the all raw diets that people are giving their cats, their dogs. I mean, I've seen crazy things. Like tonight I'm giving my dog like chicken liver with a side of skirt steak and mashing up, XYZ. So like what is your perception on like the raw diets and stuff like that?
Personally, and I would say majority of vets would, I'd say in a roundabout way, agree, but not a fan. Ultimately, it's not necessarily that it doesn't make sense in a roundabout way, but it's the preparation or the storage. And I have seen a documented case or two of a litter of puppies, or at least a couple puppies out of the litter that did test positive for salmonella and passed away. And so just the risk, to me is not worth it. I personally, and I get questions about nutrition all the time, naturally, which a lot of times it's hard to answer because I tell people all the time, you can feed the best, most expensive dog food on the market, and your dog could still have an issue for whatever reason, whether it be allergy, gastrointestinal. So, or they want to know what they can do to prepare a homemade diet. And I'm always just a believer. I'm like, look, trust the nutritionist. You're not, in my opinion, unless you're just really, really intelligent and do your research, going to be able to mimic everything that's in the, the diets that are formulated for specific reasons. Right. So, I'm not the raw diets, the, what do they call it? The semi-raw or whatever. Yeah, I'm not a big believer in those.
Yeah, so I mean, we obviously talk about it a lot, on our team and stuff like that. But what a lot of people don't understand is, pet food is actually in a lot of ways way more regulated than human food is. So there's so many standards that we have to abide by. There's so much that we have to put on the packaging. I mean, Justin designs our packaging here on the team, and so. I mean, there's so many rules and things that we have to put in place where, we make sure that your pet's getting what is we say is on the bag. It's a guaranteed analysis. Like we have to have that, or we can
get in a lot of trouble.
Get in a lot of trouble for not having it. And so I've never understood that the raw diet, because people are like, well, my dog doesn't get this, and I want to make sure they get it out of this like salmon skin or something like that. I'm like, meanwhile, we make sure our food has, glucosamine, it's got omega-3 and 6, and I mean, so there's a ton of stuff in it. So I just want to get your take on that, because it is really interesting to me, being in this industry and things like that. It just doesn't make sense to me. But, I understand people are like, well, it's their primal way of eating and things like that. And I'm like, okay, but if you think about it, they didn't have skirt steak, a chicken liver, and everything like every day either. All right, so you've seen a ton of animals, and I'm sure you've got stories to tell.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to remember all of them, but there's definitely stories out there.
You're like, after the concussion from the one of the animals or something, it's hard to talk about.
That's right.
But so go ahead and give us like, what is your top story that like
one that I probably will never forget, and it took me a minute to why don't I tell them this one? So this was at the previous clinic, and a buddy of mine who I'm still good friends with, Dr. Jordan Pack, he doesn't see any exotics at all. So he's pretty much a large animal vet, sees the small animals too, but it was the end of the day, and some client came pushing a capuchin monkey in a stroller. And
in a stroller?
In a stroller.
This is a regular Tuesday.
I mean, 10 minutes before we close, really.
Yeah.
And
it's also a regular Tuesday.
Yeah. And it was like pretty in depth. I don't remember what we had to do, but it was kind of like, all right, this can't wait till tomorrow. Well, this monkey was not tame at all. And the owner was terrified of it. And she, in tears, crying, like, we got to wait till his daddy gets here and all this. And I'm like, well, where's daddy? Like, how far away is he, right?
Where's daddy?
Yeah. And it was, he can be here in an hour. Man, the whole staff's here. We got to move a little bit quicker. And I really don't remember what we had to do, but ultimately I had to sedate the monkey.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. And this was a good-sized capuchin. I mean, I don't know, 20 pounds. We'll just say 20 pounds, so I'm not exaggerating. But he had some height on him, too. And he was in the stroller, and
toddler.
And she decides to just unzip the stroller, and the ones that are enclosed. You see people pushing dogs, So she just unzipped, and out comes that monkey, and he was not happy. Actually, I'm gonna say it was a she because I remember all the pink. There was a lot of pink stroller, pink, this, that, and the other. And I mean, the owner literally runs out of the room crying and leaves me in the room with the monkey. So I'm like, all right.
Your problem.
Keep in mind
You're
that
the vet.
yeah, keep in mind that I was already prepared to like kind of use some towels, reach in there, sedate. I already had it all drawn up in the syringe, laying on the counter.
She just unzipped
Monkey comes out of the stroller. On the exam, first thing they're gonna do is up.
Yeah.
They're table, cabinet, just like over top of my head, screaming, yelling. I mean, not like interested in me, like very angry. So I'm kind of like, all right, I probably should leave the room. Like how can I leave the room without the monkey getting out and doing more damage?
Yeah.
So I mean, stuff's flying, jars are falling. I mean, everything. So
tongue depressors,
yeah,
cotton balls,
right?
everywhere.
No, everywhere.
You walk back in and he's holding 2 tongue depressors like, let's go to war.
Oh,
Sharpened them.
Oh, it's worse than that. So the owner, no joke, is bawling, crying. So like, there's a front door, and then there's a door that goes to the back of the clinic. So she's on the other side, like trying to baby talk the monkey. It's not working. And so
Do you remember the monkey's name?
Oh, I wish I did. This is probably 5 years ago.
Like
And
princess or something.
Come here, princess. So I'm standing outside one door, and like, so Dr. Pack goes back down. I'm like, Dr. Pack, what do we do? He's like, man, you're the monkey doctor. I don't know. So literally, we look down. So we're looking under the door. The monkey's laying down, looking back at us. Like, I mean, clear as day. There's video out there somewhere. It just keeps looking and looking. And I'm like, oh, man, it sees us. What are we going to do, So finally, I'm like, get the fish net. That's all I know to do, right?
Yeah.
So I open the door with the fish net. I swear to y'all, this monkey is sitting on the exam table with my syringe full of sedation, holding it. And looking at me, and I was like,
It's like Planet of the Apes.
yeah, I'm like, I just shut the door back. I was like, yo, we got a problem. I was like, Dr. Pack, you're going in with
He's
me.
involved, and he's got a weapon.
Yeah. So luckily we went in with the net and I think a towel. It ended up being uneventful after that. He decided I was slowly putting the syringe down, please. Just
You're
put
like
this,
negotiating.
Yeah. No, literally, I'm like that. Then I start talking baby talk. I put it down.
Come on,
here we go.
Come on,
right.
princess.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think we got the net on there, and from there, I really don't remember what we did, but I was able to safely sedate the monkey, and he did not sedate me. But that was one that will probably stick with me forever. And it goes back to a lot of clients who are really scared of their exotic animals and think that we just know what to do. And I mean, we know what to do, but we got to do it safely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do something. I'm trying, right?
At that point, you just go like rent a net gun.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just hope it hits.
They're like, no, we're lights off, going home.
Yeah.
Right.
Just
Wow.
somebody else
Yeah.
moving.
Just put the for sale sign on the door and just leave the
Comes
monkey.
with monkey.
I've had when COVID was a big thing. Like I was still over there, and they started doing the curbside, and there again, we weren't set up really for some of these exotics, in my opinion. So, client pulled up, and she had I think it was like a green monkey or a vervet, and
Green monkey?
Yeah, vervets and green monkeys kind of the same thing, but they
we understand that. What is a green monkey?
It's got a green tint to it, but vervet's more of a common name. It's got
green
a long
eggs
tail
and
and
ham,
everything.
like-
Yeah. And they're
Partied
fairly
on St. Patrick's Day or something.
they're fairly large too, and it was just one of those things. They think it's routine to just pull up, And I go out there, super nice lady, and she had the monkey on a leash, thank God, and it was just running across the top of her car and like sliding down the windshield, and I'm just standing there watching this thing. I'm like, and it wanted to get to me. It was showing its teeth and everything, and it ends up like just. A running leap, slides down and like grabs the side mirror and just lunges for me. I was like, tighten up that leash, tighten up that leash.
It's like a retractable leash, like pulling it back. Come here.
Oh, hey, that's my biggest pet peeve. I'm not a retractable leash fan. My staff can tell you all about that. I have a stop sign out front that says "Stop. No retractable leashes allowed," and everybody walks right by it. But yeah,
care.
the monkey stories could probably go on forever because they honestly they are a lot of fun to work on, but they can do some damage. They really can.
Yeah.
That reminded me. I told you the lady that I worked for in high school had capuchins and stuff, and she had the one of them. I think her name was Harley or something like that. Had no teeth, and so it was so much fun going to get her because like she had the biggest attitude, but every time she would go to bite you, it was just gums.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's another thing too that what people will do, and they'll ask you all the time, and it's very unethical. But like couldn't you remove their canine teeth? And it's like. You decided to get a monkey. You know what I mean? And it can cause a lot of problems. Yeah. But unfortunately, there's some vets out there that do it, but very, very frowned upon. But yeah, They can do some damage with those things for sure.
Man, all I can pick. You need to make a T-shirt that it's just like a monkey holding a syringe and a tongue dispenser.
Yeah. And then we fortunately we were able to recently work with some spider monkeys, and those I've kind of grown to get a little bit more fond of them because they're very personable. They just seem to be a little more gentle. And we have a client
They're
who's
little too, right?
Yeah, they're
well,
small.
they can get a little bit bigger. They're lanky. They're real lanky, and they
Maybe
can
that's
kind of taller.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've got a client. The monkeys are real famous on TikTok and everything. So we got to
really?
do some work with him and stuff. So that was neat.
Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of.
It could be. There's some famous ones on social media for sure.
I'm telling you, that and teacup pigs.
that never stay that small. They turn into 150, 200 pounds, and what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not a mini pig. You know.
All right. Well, Maddie Haley, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah.
today on the Fieldmaster podcast. We appreciate it. I have a tear in my eye. I mean, laughing because I'm just picturing a monkey holding a syringe. All right, y'all. If you are in the Nashville, Lebanon area, go see Haley Veterinary Practice in Lebanon. Be sure to check them out, give them your business and stuff. And once again, thank you guys for listening to the Fieldmaster podcast. If you guys are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, we do have a video version, so you can go check that out on YouTube. Just look up Sportsman's Pride. And then if you're listening to this on YouTube, we have audio as well. If you're in the car or something like that, you're at the office and you're trying to fight off a monkey with a syringe.
That's right.
You can have a soundtrack for it. Just be sure to check us
Or
out
any type
on
of caiman.
or you can check us out on Apple or Spotify, and be sure to follow us on Instagram as well and Facebook, Sportsman's_Pride. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next episode.